Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Space Engineers Plus Me episode 24. I'm Enigmius and today we are all over the place. It's Jack of all trades day, which is kind of fun. Diversity is often quite nice when you've been spending a lot of time on very focused projects to just be able to kind of run around and do a bunch of different things that are all productive and all interesting. We're welding up a new frame. So that we can continue our mining operations. In this case, we're actually going to finish off the mining from our first uranium deposit. We did a bunch of manual mining here just with our hand drill and the little red wagon cargo helper. And now we're going to do what we can to finish off the collecting of this seam. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be a huge seam. I think we'll be able to get most of it with one pass of the drill, but we'll see. In support of that, I made a blueprint from our mining frame and used this as an opportunity to test that blueprint, see if it works before we unleash it in the wild, and I'm glad that we did because there were some changes that needed to be made. One of which was the cargo containers. Those two giant cargo containers, when welded, are full of stone because the version of the frame that we made the blueprint from had those cargo containers full of stone. A bit of a minor kind of glitch, a duping sort of thing. A person could exploit the hell out of that if they were inclined to do so. We're not going to, but I realized after the fact that would have kind of sucked if I offered this blueprint to people and they started making their own mining frames and find that they can't use them once they're all welded together because the cargo containers are full of stone. That would be a little bit embarrassing. So I'm glad we tested it. So now we just kind of have to go around and do our thing, get everything set up. One of the issues that we had was cargo containers filling with stone and then having to stop mining operations until we were able to empty them. So one of the solutions was to put a bunch of connectors. You can't put ejectors on large frame structures, so we had to use connectors instead, and then feed those connectors with a conveyor sorter set to whitelist stone, so it will only allow stone to go through. And there's having them constantly set to drain the conveyor sorter and dump the stone. And this is what we get. We get a lot of little boulders. And it works actually really well. We drained both of these large guys in a fairly reasonable amount of time. More importantly, they're certainly able to keep up with what the drill head pulls out. So if they can dump the two massive cargo containers in a reasonable amount of time, that's good, but it's even more important that they're able to dump the stone as fast as we accumulate it with the drill heads so that it doesn't pile up in our containers and make things needlessly difficult for ourselves. This is the Mark III version of the drill head that you see here. It's sped up. We're starting to head down towards the uranium. The biggest change that you'll notice right off the top is the spotlights on the end of the horizontal drill heads. You'll see what those are for in just a minute or two here, but one of the other differences is that this thing is 2 blocks wider, 1 block on either side, so that we could put an extra piston on each of the horizontal drill heads and get that much more reach out to either side before we've exhausted what we're capable of extracting with this drill head and having to move it. So that's kind of the thing that we were looking at for there, is getting as much out of a single location as we possibly can before we have to move things. Now, this is the view from a camera on the end of one of the horizontal drill heads. I mentioned this in the last episode that it was nearly useless, and one of the issues that made it so nearly useless was poor lighting. The spotlights give off a tremendous amount of light. Like, if you're looking at this now, this looks like a normal image. This looks like the way it would be lit if you were walking up to it using the light on your spacesuit, but this is actually the light from the spotlight. There's a seam of uranium, that black, dark gray kind of thing. So you can see the benefit of having a camera on the end of the drill head. That hole up there is where I was originally doing the manual mining. You can see off in the back, there's a seam of uranium. It's very useful to be able to take a look at what's going on down by the horizontal drill heads without having to go down there and look for yourself. We can see how close they are to the wall, whether or not we're pulsing frequently enough. If we're leaving too big of a gap between pulses from the drill head, we can slow down the drill head so that it doesn't spin as fast. But then we're moving forward. This is the landing gear mechanism for our new ship. This is going to be the ship that hopefully takes us to the moon. And we've tried things with landing gears and pistons and merge blocks before. We're going to try again. We're learning as much as we can from the process. a lot of the issues that I've found people complaining about with pistons and rotors exploding may have a bit to do with user error. Not all. I'm not saying there are no bugs involved. I don't want to, assume that much and cross that line and assume that everyone else is wrong. But there's a lot you can do by way of tuning for a system like this that lets you control how much force is being applied to things and when, so that things are a little bit less likely to explode. It's not 100% reliable. You can see after that test we just did with the locking mechanism, we're going to head to the rear assembly, and we've got this armor block is deformed. It's damaged. We can weld that up and repair it. And the one to the left of the merge block on the hull right there is also deformed and damaged. So there's still more tuning left to be done, but the whole idea is that there's a rotor attached to the armor block that is attached to the landing gear, so you can rotate the landing gear into the horizontal position there or the down position, and then whether it's horizontal or down, you use the piston to extend and push the merge blocks together to lock it into place. And then when you want to change the position, you unlock them, retract the piston, rotate the gear, lock them again. Pretty straightforward. I don't know how much. It could end up being one of those cases where we just end up putting them down and leaving them there forever. This little build segment that I'm showing you is actually me doing a freehand elliptical curve for the bow of the ship. Now, I've played voxel-based games for a while. So I don't want to say that this is any particular talent, so to speak, but there is a certain amount of practiced skill and luck involved in doing voxel curves without any kind of guide or, secondhand information or anything like that. And it actually turned out pretty good. I was pretty happy with it for a first go. You saw how quickly it went together. This is all real time. And then we back away a little bit, and we can see that it actually looks like kind of an elliptical curve, which is good. But what we need to do after we make these kinds of elliptical curves in this environment is we have to go back and check on our drill and make sure that the drills are advanced far enough that they're continuing to gather stuff. You can see every once in a while the drill gets kind of caught up on some rocks. A little bit from time to time is not a big deal, but it's surprising just how little it takes before it gets caught up and it can't move, and you have to make adjustments to it. You have to retract the drill heads or something to that effect. For right now, it's making good progress, and it's actually good to go off and do other things between adjustments, because patience is sort of the thing that we need when we're doing this, and making sure that we're doing it properly so that the drills don't get caught up because we didn't drill enough of the path that we were doing to keep the drills from catching on the different sort of crags and stuff that are created before we move them forward. So the drill head is working all right. The lighting and the camera is fantastic. It's a tremendous asset and well worth having in place. But then we have to go back and continue building the ship, because we have to get to the moon someday. Now, I went around and I filled in. We did the outline, basically, and now we filled it all in with cubes, or at least the frames of the cubes. And now we have to go through and weld them all together. And this is kind of showcasing the benefits of having a ship with a welder on it. We don't have to worry so much about the speed of the welding, because it's slower than the welder that we carry, but it can weld up to 4 blocks at a time, which is kind of neat. Something that I learned just in the process of messing around. But more importantly, the ship can carry enough steel plates to do all of the welding for this platform without having to go and pick any more up, which is not something that you would be able to do with just the manual drill and your player character inventory, backpack, whatever you want to call it. So the key for me is just kind of creeping down very slowly, very carefully, because we don't want to be hitting the chassis too hard. If you do, we tend to break off welders, we tend to break off grinders, we tend to dent the chassis, we tend to do all kinds of awful things. So a little bit of patience pays off. One of the things that I thought of is that it would have been a lot easier to do this if I had just made a minor modification, taken the welder head off, put a 90-degree tube, and then put the welder back on so that it was pointing down, and then just gone and done the passes with the ship completely level, sliding back and forth, side to side, doing all the welding that way. So if we end up doing any more of these flat sections like this, like that, I'd probably try that. changing the drill configuration so that we can do things without having to have the ship tilted like that. Now this is an example of something that failed. I decided it might be neat to have something that would prevent rocks from bouncing past this collector on the end of the horizontal drill head. But I didn't want anything big and bulky, so I went for the smallest shapes that I could for the large-sized components. And then, you know, we've got some little angled things that we can fill in so it looks half decent. The thing that I did here is I stopped the drilling and I retracted the drill head so that I could get in here and add these things. And not only was it not effective in catching more little rocks of uranium as they bounced past, but it ruined the alignment of the whole thing. It took me about another 15 to 20 minutes to get the drill heads aligned so that they would go around in the circular path around the seam here without getting caught up on things, without bouncing off the roof or bouncing off the floor. So it was kind of a learning experience in two ways. One, that the shroud wasn't effective, and two, that it's not a good idea to stop the drill unless you want to have to spend an unreasonable amount of time fixing things. So this is the hull. All of the cubes that you saw before were welded. We went around and we did some detailing with angle blocks around the edges, and then we covered over the landing gear bays with some sloped blocks. And once everything here is welded up, this will be basically the main floor of the ship. I haven't decided specifically how the layout is going to be. I know that the ship is basically going to be a mobile base. It's going to be a mobile station that's going to have all of the machines that we need inside. It's going to have power generation. It's going to have storage. And it's going to be laid out neatly so that it doesn't feel claustrophobic and weird trying to get anything done. But one of the issues that I encountered with this is that I built it on a landing gear, like we always do. You say, I want to build a new large ship. It gives you a landing gear that you can anchor to the ground, and then you start building on that. And then as time went on, the rear end of the ship actually started to sag as I started to build it out. And I'd never seen that before. You can see here with the green line, that's the line basically flat ground. And then with the red line added onto it, that's the line of the hull. They should be parallel, not converging. I wanted to illustrate the sag that we had in place here, because my concern is that if we kept building the ship, either things were going to snap off on their own, or when we went to try and release the ship for its maiden flight, it would break off in such a way that the ship would crash, because it would just, before it could level itself out, it would start bouncing off of things and it would be bad, bad, bad. So we had to come up with a solution to get the whole thing level again before we wanted to continue and run the risk of having things go catastrophically wrong. So you can see here, underneath in the purple lighting, yes, I changed the lights in the landing gear base to purple. I'm keeping it that way. I put a piston underneath with some blocks connected to the piston just so that there's a little bit between the piston head and the ground. And I started the frames that will hopefully eventually hold the hull level with everything else. And then all I had to do was hop in the control seat, manipulate the piston, hopefully push it down. With any luck, it would lift up the hull, and then we could get down underneath while the piston was holding it, fill out the frame. These are cameras that I put in the landing gear bays. I was hoping I would be able to see the piston from here, but I can't. But these cameras are primarily here so I can check and see what's going on with the landing gears without having to go underneath the hull. Very, very handy. Purple lighting is fantastic. I love it. But in this particular case, we can't see the piston, so we have to kind of just rotate our view a little bit from the seat. The same way we do with the mining rigs. You can get a pretty wide view. We get it down underneath, and then we start extending the piston. The piston is extending intentionally as slowly as possible because, again, we don't want fast collisions with anything. We want to give ourselves the best possible chance of making everything work instead of simply exploding and breaking our hearts. It's not fast, but if you've ever changed the tire on a car before, you know that the jack doesn't work quickly. It just does a good job of lifting heavy things. And in this case, it's doing a good job of lifting a very heavy thing high enough that we'll be able to get underneath, place the extra blocks that we need on the frames that we've built so that when we set it back down onto those frames, the whole hull will be perfectly level and parallel with the surface of the ice, and we don't have to worry about what's going to happen when we release the ship from the landing gear for its maiden flights, because we'll be able to just have the gyroscopes do the inertial dampener hover thing, and life will be good. And that's what I've been working on. We've got all kinds of stuff on the go. Not necessarily anything complete, but getting very, very close. Next episode, like I said, I would like to have the blueprints for the drill head and the drill frame ready for you guys. If they're not ready, we might have to put it off, but that's the goal. Anyways, we're going to continue working on our ship so that we can eventually get to the moon someday with something that's going to be able to keep us from dying, or realizing, well, we wish we had brought a refinery because we're gathering all this stuff and we can't do anything with it. So if you want to be notified when we add future videos, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media always in the information box below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.